Hello and welcome to another episode of The Lion's Den. I've got obviously a very positive message on screen right now, but what we're going to be talking about today is all about why Dark Angels suck. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about what Dark Angels will need to hopefully get from the data slate that is upcoming to sort of put them back into a stronger position, because recently they've been struggling a little bit. And what I'm really hoping to do is kind of put a wish list together for what I would like to see from Games Workshop. Be very interesting to see like how much of this ends up aligning to Games Workshop and what they do actually do. Do they view Dark Angels as in a negative position? From what I see in the community, a lot of Dark Angels fans are feeling a bit rough right now. They're struggling in their competitive games. They're not feeling that Dark Angels are able to compete with sort of the Marine counterparts, and especially with Death Guard coming in and being sort of the default strong heavy infantry army. It makes it even worse for Dark Angels because, you know, we're not the best heavy infantry army. We're not the second best heavy infantry army near, because that's Custodes. And nor are we the best sort of Marine infantry army, because you've got EC, Blood Angels, well, I guess Space Wolves will be coming out soon, and they'll probably take one of those slots, and probably even CSM as well. So there's a whole plethora. I think we do need to fall into the heavy melee slot, which is your Custodes, your Death Guard, etc., etc. That's where we really start to shine. But right now, we're just not quite up there competing with, you know, your Death Shroud Terminators, your 15 Wardens, etc., etc. So we are struggling a little bit. That doesn't mean we're not good. I you know, personally, I have still had a significant amount of success. I'm really enjoying Stormlance. I'm actually personally switching to Gladius now, though. Looking at the new mission pack, I think the leak will probably be fully out by the time this goes live. And I've seen a leak today when I'm recording. This the Wednesday. I think like most people will have seen it on the Wednesday because it's been all over the internet. And looking at like that push to No Man's Land, I think switching up to that kind of 2-up stat check army that similarly I've been using on WTC terrain, I think is a really great shift. So excited to see what that looks like. Quite excited to go back to Gladius as well, like having access to a Lance stratagem in this sort of new meta with Death Guard. I think there'll still be a considerable amount of Custodes. And also, if I was a different faction looking to counter Death Guard, I'd be putting a lot of vehicles in. So having a Lance strat, just so that like some of our sort of our non-anti-vehicle units are able to still sort of wound on fours. I think that's really going to be quite key. So as I mentioned in the notes here, there is a new mission pack on the way. We've now seen it for the most part. If you haven't, I'm not going to spoil it right now. So just go look at Reddit. I assume it's all over Reddit. Someone very kindly took photos of it all and spoiled it all over the internet. So, you know, obviously I'm not a huge fan of spoilers, but like equally as a competitive player, I will use them because otherwise I would be disadvantaged. So you know what, like fair play. But equally like let the GW marketing team have their moment at the same time. But yeah, it is what it is. New data slate is coming. We've not heard a huge amount about that. We can start making sort of our speculations, our hopes, our worries as well. And I think there's definitely some concerns that I've got with this one, usually around sort of splash damage. But we'll come on to that a little bit later. What I really want to focus on is what we need. And obviously, to get into the mood of what we needed, I had a beer. So I've had exactly one beer and I'm feeling a little bit tipsy. So obviously, this is going to be the highest quality content that you're going to see all evening, of course. So let's jump in to the first slide. So I think at its core, something that we really do struggle with is our detachments, because ultimately we play Stormlance or we play Gladius. If Games Workshop tomorrow, and I'm not saying this is going to happen because I really don't think it should, but if Games Workshop said, right, non-Codex compliant, you're locked out of Codex Space Marine detachments. You must only play the ones in your supplement. Blood Angels are going to be pretty happy. They've still got Sons of Sanguinius. They've still got Angelic Inheritors. Space Wolves are probably going to be pretty damn thrilled looking at what they've got. I guess the others, well, Black Spear for Deathwatch, very happy. And I guess maybe Black Templars, like, they're not thrilled, but they're also not like screaming and crying and shitting themselves. So that's kind of good. But also Black Templars need a bit of love regardless. Dark Angels, on the other hand, would be up shit creek without a paddle. Because our detachments are just poor. The strongest one has no synergy with our strongest units. So there's definitely play in Lion's Blade, especially for teams. I was looking at a list sort of with the 15 Deathwing Knights and then 10 Assault Terminators with an Ancient for kind of sitting behind a wall on an objective, wait for your opponent to go onto the objective and do the counter charge strat, and then just basically just stop, like force them to decide between scoring primary and getting charged by your big nasty units. So and also kind of out OC'd by big nasty units like that Thunderhammer, Storm Shield, Terminator brick. So there's definitely play there. Is that good for singles? Probably not, and I think the majority of us are still playing singles. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in that team. Personally, I don't have enough time to test it. I'm sure there'll be some brilliant work from the internationals as they sort of approach WTC, if they do see some potential in it, and hopefully we will see something from that. But I feel like for singles that might be a bit of a red herring, because you really would need the cards and a couple of other different things to go right. Maybe there's a list there. Is it a bit too much effort to potentially do? Probably, for what would always be very close games. So my main issue with our detachments are speed. Even in Lion's Blade, which does add speed to your Deathwing units, you have to jump through a considerable number of hoops to get it, which is difficult. Well, it's not difficult to do, but it's additional hoops that, when you compare that to Stormlance, obviously it's just roll a dice, you get that many extra inches. In Lion's Blade, it's charge with a Ravenwing unit, then you get 2 extra inches to your charge, which also is less than average on a dice for advance. But also like has the potential to actually block you off, because obviously you've got to go base to base if you can base, and there's loads of different things that could actually cause some issues there, which then means maybe our ATVs are charging rather than doing their real job, which is scoring points. So that's sort of the issue with Lion's Blade right now. So maybe if they added more to the charge, like originally I put if they added 4 inches to the charge. And I was like, well, that gives you a 5-inch charge out of Deep Strike. Like, that feels a bit silly. But equally, I don't really know any other way to increase that speed with Lion's Blade and keep that feeling to it. Would it just be the best detachment if it had that? Let alone for Dark Angels, maybe for in the whole game. Maybe. I think there's definitely, like, it's got a good suite of strats. It's got some really interesting stuff. But ultimately, that core ability of the detachment is just poor compared to your Gladius or your Stormlance. So I think the quick and simple fix is to add additional inches to what the Deathwing get when you're engagement range with the Ravenwing. Make that like a real premium. So that then you are deep striking with your Deathwing Knights. You are sort of, looking for those kinds of ways that you can trick your opponent. You almost become a pseudo Death Shroud Terminator, which is what we'll come on to in a minute. There's limitations to it, but you get a tighter charge. So maybe it's just 3 inches. And then suddenly you've got a 6-inch charge out of Deep Strike. Cool, good. I think that's pretty solid. Is it a harder loop to jump through compared to just having something in the Be Afflicted? Yes, 100%. But obviously we're looking at Death Shroud, and Death Shroud are probably now one of the best units in the game, pound for pound. So, there's definitely conversations and arguments for adding inches, but that seems to be the fix that I would do. If someone said you must fix the Lions Blade Task Force, that would be the first thing that I would do. And then similarly for Inner Circle, I would change the 6-inch Deep Strike strat to allow it to charge, because why would you 6-inch Deep Strike like any kind of like Terminator unit? They're just not very good at shooting. Yes, you get a plethora of Stormbolter shots, but considering what will happen to that Terminator unit after you Deep Strike it 6 inches away from your opponent's front line, not nice things are going to happen. And Stormbolters ain't doing much against sort of, big tanks. Typhoon missile launchers aren't doing much against tanks. They're strength 9. There's a plethora of reasons that just make that extremely problematic, even if you are taking advantage of the +1 to wound on an objective. So I just think, let them charge. Let them do that with a Deathwing Knight unit, because ultimately you've only got 2. So you'd get to use this for 2 of the units, and you would get to rapid ingress another one. That sounds pretty solid. It's 3 CP to really use it. And they're kind of stuck there after doing that job, which is similar to the Death Shroud. But that would be my fix, I think, just to give that sort of that movement speed advantage. And then I think those detachments are actually pretty solid. Equally, that is with no testing, so they might end up being too good. It might actually do nothing to them. But those would be sort of off the top of my head the ones that I would do. And then next, I do think both the Unforgiven Task Force and Hunters have some real potential. The problem is Hunters buffs all of the units that we don't really play, and it buffs a type of unit that has seen very little play in 10th because of its inability to go through walls, which is such a major part of competitive play. That Company of Hunters really suffers because of that. Maybe Company of Hunters needs a similar to a Lion's Blade detachment kind of style stratagem where you can go through walls, the Knights of Iron. Will that work? I mean, you're still playing things like Outriders and Ravenwing Black Knights, and we'll talk about Ravenwing Black Knights later, but Outriders I do really like. I wouldn't play that many of them. Like, yeah, they become battle line. Is it worth spamming your list full of them? Probably not. So it's a disappointment, because all of those key Dark Angels units that really benefit from being a Dark Angel, like your Deathwing Knights, I guess like your Inner Circle companions as well. Obviously, they're not having the greatest of times at the moment, but they do have the potential. Company of Hunters doesn't buff any of them, and then Unforgiven just falls into that bracket as well, that it just suffers from movement problems. It doesn't enable those Deathwing Knights, it doesn't enable those key units, and the other units that it does enable, same with Company of Hunters, they just don't have the efficiency that you need to really compete in 10th edition, because ultimately, like, I do still think, and looking at this new mission pack, I think we are in the era of efficiency. We're going to be closer to each other, we're going to be a lot more scrappy, a lot more interactive, and I think there's going to be a considerable amount of trading. That kind of jail build, I think, is going to get pushed back on. The rules seem to be quite hostile to that, which I do think is probably a good thing. Not ideal for Dark Angel Stormlance players, because obviously that was an element of the game that we could really use, but that has sort of reduced. But I do think Unforgiven and Hunters have potential. I don't know what I would change in them to keep them both thematic and make them competitively viable. I think that one is a little bit beyond me, because it comes back to that problem of speed. Maybe it's actually around the data sheet, so maybe Hellblasters, maybe around Ravenwing Black Knights. We're definitely going to be talking about them, and sort of how lackluster I think they are in a bit. But there's definitely potential in those detachments, because they have strong abilities. And since they have those strong abilities, there's always a chance that the data sheets line up, and then we're able to use it. So, there's potential there, and I think there's some quick and easy fixes, potentially too strong with those fixes, but like there's definitely some fixes that I could come up with reasonably swiftly, because that key problem of speed that Stormlance and Gladius solve, that's kind of what we need to avoid. Well, not avoid, but that's what we need in our detachments. Next, we're going to go into characters, and I'm going to start with Asmodai. I'm sure everyone expected me to start with the lion. I'm not actually going to start with the lion. He's up second. Asmodai is a character that I really want to see in competitive play because that model is gorgeous. It's just been updated, absolutely incredible, interesting lore. Does absolutely soddle. Really, really disappointing data sheet. And even for his points, it's just not worth it. Like, you know, you look at the plethora of solid Space Marine characters, and Asmodai just does not feature at all. And I think that the main thing around that is that he needs something that adds a defensive element to the unit that he leads. And I think that would probably look like, it's also, you know, he does CP interaction. We've got Azrael. Like, that is literally the definition of, no, we don't need McDonald's. We've got McDonald's at home, and it's like a shitty potato that your mum chops up. So you're not going to use it, right? You're going to get the nice McDonald's in Azrael. And I mean, obviously, yeah, we're spoiled with Azrael, but like equally, Asmodai just needs to do different things. Otherwise, he's going to remain irrelevant. So I threw up fights first, maybe some defensive buffs. Anything that offsets that sort of inner circle companion lack of durability. Or to be honest, just Tacticus lack of durability. Toughness 4, 3 up save, 2 to 3 wounds is not very survivable in 10th edition. So any kind of support there I think would be really beneficial. Not sure what that looks like. Could it be a kind of like a Shield of the Emperor ability that gives them an invulnerable save? Could it be like a once per game Feel No Pain? That would actually be, I think, super interesting. Like maybe they get the kind of Warden style ability where once per game they get a 4-up Feel No Pain. That on Inner Circle Companions could be really cool because between that and like minus one to hit, I think that could be pretty spicy. And then obviously Asmodai does help that unit hit rather hard. Next, we'll go on to the Lion. I would really like to see him more as a damage multiplier. There's a very enjoyable bit in Son of the Forest where the Lion is leading a naval engagement. And it's absolutely incredible. It's just this demonstration of perfect tactics and, you know, absolute brilliance and genius. And it does bring in the fact that he's this incredible duelist and swordsman. I won't spoil what he does during that battle, but there's so many different aspects that show his character in all its glory. And I feel like we don't have that. He's very one-dimensional in terms of his rule set right now. He is stabby. And the problem is, comparatively, he's not stabby enough. He doesn't stand up overly well against loads of different options. I mean, obviously, like it's a tough one to balance because a 3-up invulnerable save with fights first and the ability to lone up him, that is always going to be extremely difficult to sort of efficiently balance. What that looks like, I'm not too sure, but I think maybe take away some of that. That's maybe even take away the 3-up invulnerable save and give him loads of like army boosting abilities, and then he can be that tactician but also have fights first. So you've got to be defensive with him still because you can't just rely on that 3-up invul. Let's be honest, you couldn't anyway. And then that brings a lot more aspects to his game of how he could buff the army. Yeah, that probably comes with a points increase, and rightfully so. You know, Guilliman's 345 points, and he's probably going up in the next data slate. But, you know, I would really like to see the Lion just have something that actually supports his army rather than a 4-up Feel No Pain to mortal wounds. Because that is realistically the only thing he does right now. The other abilities are cute, but like you're not really going to see them ever. So I'd really like to see some sort of damage multiplier, maybe like a reroll ones to wound aura. I'm not sure what else, but like that would be something that I would like to see. You know, make him a damage multiplier. Not maybe as like quite as powerful in that damage multiplication as Guilliman, because like Guilliman's tactics, that's his thing. But equally, like, you know, the lion is not just some dumb Chad that just whacks people with a sword. There's a lot more nuance to his character, and I feel like that's kind of been lost in this current rule set. And equally, I think it's very difficult for the rules team to balance him again because of that fights first and 3-up and vulnerable save. Like, I really don't envy them. It's a tough job because either it's going to be completely busted or it's going to be really poor. And right now, it just does continue to be really poor, unfortunately. Honestly, I'd take him going back to 285 points and going back to 1 damage on his sweep, which does kind of suck because, like, he should have a 2 damage sweep. But equally, like, he needs either if he's going to stay the way he is, he needs a points reduction to be more efficient. And then finally, before I go on to the final 2 characters, I'm not going to be talking about things like Ezekiel because obviously he is a very, very ancient model, and I don't think it's within Games Workshop's interest to kind of update him, make him like the super meta Uber thing. I just don't see them doing that. I think they'd probably be quite cautious of doing that because then 3D printer go brr, and I think that would happen quite a lot. And they will want to have that moment where they create a new upscaled Ezekiel at some point, or they'll kill him off, one of the two. But right now, I don't really see him changing. But Belial and Lazarus, they're both relatively new models. Belial especially, gorgeous model. Lazarus, really cool model as well. They could really do with a little bit of a hand. I think they've had sort of the enough points cuts for us to go, okay, it's the rule set, not the points that are the problem, which is kind of what we saw with Outriders. They went from over 100 points to 90 points, and now they're down to 80 points, and they still weren't seeing any play. So then the rules changed, and I think we're at that point with Belial, Lazarus, and Asmodai as well. So those are the ones that I think really need a change. And if I was, sorry, I've just punched my mic there. If I was to like say you have to do this one thing, Games Workshop, I would quite like it to be on those characters, because the reason that you probably play Dark Angels is the lore, and a lot of that lore is centered around characters. And obviously we want to be as competitive as possible, but the reason that you are drawn to Dark Angels and not maybe jumping over to like Space Wolves right now, or Blood Angels or Custodes, is because there's an attachment to it, which I think is something that evident that I've seen with the sort of content creation and the community management of sort of a bit of working with Dark Angels players. There is a real love of that lore. I don't know if other factions have it quite as deep. We seem to at Black Crow seem to see it more with Dark Angels players than sort of with the other sort of specialist communities that we have, or at least we have done so far. But I think that's a really special thing about Dark Angels. Don't get me wrong, everyone like fucking loves their lore. Let's be honest. But like there is something that draws people to go, oh, I know the Lion's not the best, but I still want to play him. And I would love to see, people being able to play Belial. You've probably read the Purging of Catalyst, where Belial's super badass, really cool in that. And Lazarus, his little short story, I haven't read Enmity's Edge yet, but in the short story that I did read about him, where he becomes Primaris, that was super cool as well. So yeah, I would quite like to see a change there. Belial's precision ability is a complete waste of time. It's entirely irrelevant. So like, why have it? Just change it. Super easy. Just get rid of that. Make it something else. Let's go on to the Deathwing. Redemptors down 10 points. Nice and simple. Just make them more efficient. And then I think they're a really solid unit. Deathwing Terminators definitely need to have Thunderhammers and Storm Shields so that they can be 4 wounds rather than 3. And like, they need a relevant ability. Because right now, getting +1 to hit against the Oath target, we've already got full rerolls. Like, what's the actual appeal? Like, yes, they've got a Watcher, which sort of makes them decent compared to other Terminators. They've got that defensive mechanism against mortal wounds. But they just seem to really have a lackluster ability. And it's like, it improves your ability to hit with weapons that are already re-rolling and then that are already not that good. Like Power Fists, great. Stormbolters, who gives a fuck? Like, come on. So I think, there's definitely something that needs to change with them. Something that makes them really cool. Maybe that kind of that inner circle ability. I know that obviously Space Wolves have literally just got like the previous inner circle ability of the -1 to wound if strength is higher. I think Deathwing Terminators need that as well. I think there's going to be a lot of comparison with Wolfguard Terminators and Deathwing Terminators, and people going, yeah, that's really what they should have looked like. But that, interesting question. Do Games Workshop care enough to change Deathwing Terminators when we got Deathwing Knights doing so well? Not sure, but I would quite like to see that, because the reason that I started playing Dark Angels was Terminator spam, because I just love the Terminator model. I've got tons of the old sculpts upstairs. They're just something I really love. And then next, I think Inner Circle Companions, they need a hand. They're struggling at the moment, and like you do see the occasional blob of 6 pop up, maybe sometimes with Azrael or with a Librarian or a Judicia. But I've just, in my experience, it's always never got its points back. And I think that's probably because I personally don't get the most out of Fights First units, especially ones that trade off their survivability for Fights First. But I just think that +1 to hit against characters, kind of irrelevant. Like, the -1 to hit, when led, really nice. I like that a lot. But maybe like re-rolling ones to wound into character units, that could be really, really nice. Or do the Blade Guard treatment and put them down to 80 points so they're in that flex spot again. Competing with JPIs at that 90-point slot is tough. But also, like right now, I remember sort of the moment that I really shifted and went up a gear was when I'd written my list post slate in January, and I've gone, okay, we're going to put 6 ICCs and Librarian in because that fits that slot, and then I just get to play everything else. And then I went, actually, what does the bike brick look like? That's something that's just had this update, something that seems really quite powerful. It unlocks all these stratagems for me, and I changed it, and I'd never looked back. I've never put Inner Circle Companions in my list again. So I think they do just need a little something, because comparatively to other units, they're just not quite cutting the mustard, which is a real shame, because they're gorgeous models. I've got 12 of them sitting upstairs, so I do really want something to do with them. But yeah, they're just because they've kind of always got to have a character as well, they just become a little bit too expensive. And if they've got a character with them, would you really want to run 3? Well, no, you kind of got to run 6. Then suddenly it's 180 points plus character, blah, blah, blah. You see the issue. So ICCs, I think, need a little bit of love. And possibly around wound rerolls, and I think maybe that with a Librarian or a Judy, that'd be really nice. Ravenwing. So again, a bit like Ezekiel, I don't think the Vengeance and the Dark Shroud are getting any love until they get Primarisified, which is a bit of a shame, but like equally, I'm very excited to see what that Primaris model looks like if it does happen. I really hope it does, because like one of those Storm Speeders with a cool plasma battery on it would look sick, and I imagine it would also be quite good. So I'd love to see that. But I'm not expecting any changes. I'm not expecting any major changes to the Ravenwing in general. Ravenwing Black Knights are, as I put here, just an utter joke with how poor they are. When Lion's Blade came out, and obviously they gained not Deathwing, when they gained Dev Wounds, there was a lot of excitement over that. And it just fell away so quickly because they're just 1 damage. And it's just incredibly poor. For 90 points, they're just not worth it. They're just worse than Outriders, and they're 10 points more expensive. It's a real shame, because they're such cool models. Maybe they need their Primaris upgrade, so that, again, they can kind of get good. But equally, like, just give them 2 damage at this point. Like, let's just see what that looks like. 90-point bike unit with 2 damage with anti-vehicle, anti-monster 4 up on the charge. Dev Wounds, 2 damage. Perfect. Let's just see what it looks like. If it's busted, it's busted. They can change the points on them. But I think that's the easier switch than fucking around with that data sheet anymore, because it's demonstrated that that 1 damage is the problem. Giving them dev wounds did not solve that, unfortunately. They just don't have the critical mass of attacks to make that relevant. But we've seen with 2 damage that 3 attacks is fine, because we've seen it with some power fists, things like that. You know, it doesn't need to be world breaking. Doesn't need to be your super mega killer unit, but just making them just a bit more efficient in the skirmish game for that 90 points. So they're actually competing with JPIs. That would be super interesting. Samael could go down in points a little bit. I'd like to see him at 110, 105. But like he's seeing play competitively. I think he's really cool, especially with the unit of Outriders. You know, that unit going from 195 to like 190, 185. That's nice. That's exciting. And like just then suddenly it's this kind of hybrid skirmish hammer unit that I think's got real potential. So yeah, I think Samael could use a small drop, but equally that might be just my Dark Angels bias coming through, that I want to see these characters on the table. But yeah, Samael, I think he could go down a couple of points, and just kind of see what that looks like. But equally, I'm probably going, yeah, let's just make Dark Angels super buffed and see what it looks like. Shock horror, it'll look pretty good if they do all of this. And I'm not sort of campaigning for all of this to happen, just like some elements of it. Like, we don't need to be the most busted faction. We just need to be a little bit like 2 or 3% better. I think that will be the sweet spot, because right now we're edging down from 45 to your 44s and you know, your other low 40s, and I just think something needs to happen there, because otherwise Dark Angels are just, you know, people are just going to go, well, why am I playing them? Why am I not playing Ultramarines? Why am I not playing Space Wolves? You know, heads are going to turn when they see those new Space Wolves boxes. Even my head turned when I saw that Space Wolf box. It looks incredible. It's thematic. The rule set, so cool and interesting. Pretty damn competitive as well by the looks of things. And that's something that I would really love to see for Dark Angels. I kind of wish the rules team that we currently have had been able to write the Dark Angels book, because again, like, if you've watched a lot of my videos, you'll know that I don't talk shit on the rules team. I think they are brilliant, at like such a talented set of people, and like having met quite a few of them as well now. He says having met 2 of them, they're both far better players than I am, and also just all round really good people that are always up for a chat as well about like how you're feeling about the game and things like that. So massive respect to those 2 particular individuals as well. But you know, I think I would like to see what they would do if they got to just completely rip up and rewrite the Dark Angels book. But we might get to see that with Space Marines, looking at those potential little leaks that, well, not leaks, but like hints that Games Workshop have given us. So yeah, that would be interesting. Maybe if they got to do that for Dark Angels, that would be quite cool. And then finally, Codex Marine changes. I think it's really important to sort of look at Dark Angels in the context of Codex Marines and how Marines are doing in general. And the short answer is that there is one set of Marines that's doing very well, and that's Ultramarines. Blood Angels, to a lesser extent, are doing quite well, which is why I am concerned for Jump Pack Intercessors, Scouts, and the Catan Captain. Catan Captain is the Gravis Armoured Captain with the enhancement in Gladius called Artificer Armour. Gives him a 2-up, gives him a 5-up, Feel No Pain. So he's a 2-up, 4-up, 5-up, halves damage. He's pretty damn durable, especially when you look in, and he's got that free strat ability, which can often be used to re-roll an invulnerable save. So he's very nice, especially at 90 points. Just so reliable, and I like, he's the reason that I've switched over to Gladius, because I just love that unit so much. It always does far more than its points, so you know, maybe something that does go up in points if it's doing far more than its points, could be said. JPIs are in every damn list. I think Guilliman should probably be the only change, because like, if we were seeing just generic Space Marines dominating, that's problematic. I think Calgar is finally pointed correctly. Guilliman at 345, after he's had such a big buff, I think it was really interesting to see where he was at. I think he can go up another 10, 20 points and still be competitive. I would really like to see just like some tweaks there to Guilliman and not to Space Marines, because I just think that the other chapters will suffer if we get nerfed for Guilliman's sins. So that'll be interesting. I think, my sort of real hope is that JPIs and Scouts don't get hit, because they are pretty damn intrinsic to Dark Angels lists. But, JPIs obviously in 10s are seeing a lot more play in Blood Angels. And Scouts are just sort of universal in terms of their ability, because they are the only unit that does that job. You could put Vindicators back up here as well. There's definitely an argument that Vindicators take another little points increase. But again, I think it goes back to that same problem with Scouts, that we don't have any other alternative to that Vindicator. It is the only efficient datasheet at doing that job. And if it's the only efficient datasheet at doing that job, then we have to take it. Obviously, Dark Angels have taken it less. The Gladius versions have. But, there's definitely an argument from looking at particularly the Ultramarines list that it could take a bit of a nerf. So, that's what I'm hoping for. That we get some love, some sort of gentle caresses and cuddles from Games Workshop. That would definitely help. And I think we might get some of it. If we got, say, 2 of the things that I've talked about, maybe like a detachment change and some changes to the characters, I think I would be absolutely thrilled. That would be more than enough. I kind of just want to play with the Dark Angels detachment competitively. I love Stormlance and I love Gladius. They're so much fun, but I want to play Dark Angels. And it would be really cool to be able to do that. So I'd love to see a couple of changes there. And then ultimately, again, going back to that, I want to play Dark Angels. I would like to see a little bit of love for those characters. Even sacrificing the Deathwing Terminators stay the same. Your Inner Circle Companions stay the same. All of that stuff. I do think Ravenwing Black Knights need to change, because they're just atrocious. What that looks like, I think it is just 2 damage, done, sorted. But it's the characters and the attachments I would really like to see changed. So yeah, that's where my head's at. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I've rambled considerably. Hopefully it's been useful and informative rambling. I think it has been. I've enjoyed doing it. It's sort of let me collect my thoughts in terms of what I'm hoping for this slate. And I'm quite excited for it, to be honest. Alongside this new mission pack, it seems business as usual, but with some finesse, which is really positive. I like the way that we are moving towards that business as usual, but just with a little bit of correcting nudges along the way. Nothing that swerves us off the road, but just that sort of nudge in the right direction. And I think that is partly because, again, singing the praises of the rules team, that is again going back to the quality of the analysts and the rules writers that we now have in that team. That, honestly, I think compare that to how 9th was. It's very, very different. Compare that even to the start of 10th. I remember going to the table against Josh Roberts the first time I met him, and he just went, "Don't worry, I'm going to nerf this Canoptic Core army that I'm playing." And at the end of it, I was like, "Thank God you're going to nerf that," and he did. So I think it's chalk and cheese seeing that. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of love for Dark Angels now, because we didn't in the last slate, and that was a shame. Did we need to at that point? Probably not. I genuinely didn't think we did. I thought we could have. But now I think it's approaching that moment where it's like, okay, Dark Angels are kind of one of the least relevant Marine factions. So they need something. But ultimately, Thank you so much to the sponsors that sponsor us. So that's Glasshammer Gaming. You can use the code Black Crow at checkout to get 5% off of hopefully your lovely new buffed Dark Angels units. You can use BCG5 to get some lovely terrain at Terrain Forge. We do love the Terrain Forge terrain. It looks sick. Like it's really nice the way that they give sort of the extra features that often you don't see on other terrain, which is cool. Gives a bit more thematic side to it as well. And let's be honest, we are nerds that love space battles, so let's make our space battles look cool while we're playing competitively. Then obviously we've got Trident Forgeworks. I really hope that I've got that name right because I've just bought a case off them. But they're a great little business that do carrier cases, 3D print it. I'm having Dark Angel symbol on one side and the Black Crow symbol on the other. So really excited to see that. I'll do a little reveal of that later. If you like me talking bollocks, then you can go and join the Angelus Mortis Discord server and the Black Crow Discord server. Angelus Mortis is the stuff that I do on the side. It's the coaching that I do to try and help people get a little bit more competitive. If you want to hear a bit more about that, just drop me an email at toby@angelus-mortis.co.uk. And we can have a chat about what we've sort of got on offer. I say we, it's just me. And you get this personality still of the slightly eclectic moron that somehow does well at Toy Soldiers. But yeah, come join the Discord servers. Give us a like on Facebook. Give us a follow on Instagram. All that good shit. Give us a comment down below, like comments for the comment god. All that kind of stuff. And like, go and give 6++ some love because they're fucking awesome. I love 6++. They're the best boys. So go give them some love. Who else should get some love right now? Go give VT some love. I think they've just done a video on Dark Angels, and I think they just did a battle report with Lion's Blade. So go give them some love. Go give Jord love. He's a good boy. Very, very nice boy. I think there's so many other people that I could mention because this community is incredible. But just go and hug your local nerd. Just make sure they've washed first, especially with more Death Guard around at the moment. But most importantly, tell me what you think. I want to know. The other most important is stay loyal, fuckers. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.